Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first session of the Salem Interfaith Peace Vlog. I'm Valerie Geer, Community Outreach Chaplain at the Withnell Family YMCA in Salem, Oregon, and one of your hosts for this vlog series.
And I'm Kyle Dickinson, the Executive Director for the Salem Leadership Foundation, your other host for this series. And today we are joined by Rabbi Eli Herb from Temple Beth Shalom. Thanks for joining us. And before we jump into our interview, Val, why don't you tell us a little bit about where we're going with this vlog series?
Yeah, so the purpose of the Salem Interfaith vlog series is to interview faith leaders from different world religions that are here in Salem, so that we can create a space where we can learn and better understand how their particular religious worldview affects how they perceive peace and pursue peace and flourishing for our community. So with that, Rabbi Eli, would you mind introducing yourself to us a little bit and telling us a bit about yourself?
Sure. Eli Herb. I grew up in Colorado and moved to Salem 8.5 years ago from Boston, where I was in rabbinical school. I went to Hebrew college there, rabbinical school in Boston, and moved here with my family. We have 3 kids. My wife came in and I have 3 kids. 2 of them are grown up and out of the house now, and one is still at home, thank God. And yeah, so I've been the rabbi at Temple Beth Shalom. That's why we moved here was for that position. So I've been there for 8.5 years.
Wonderful.
All right, ready to jump in? Okay. Well, the Hebrew word shalom, often translated as peace in English. But can you tell us about the fuller definition of shalom from a Jewish perspective?
Sure. Yeah, I actually brought in the entry from the biblical dictionary
Love it.
about it because
Nice.
because
Yeah.
the word has so many valences and all of them are important. So
Yeah.
so it ranges from to be complete or sound, to be finished or ended, to be sound or uninjured, to make safe, to make whole or good, or to restore a lost thing, to pay vows, to pay the bill, to recompense, reward, etc. And to be performed, I would say, to be performed or be repaid. So you're interesting in the biblical thing, like you don't really hear the word peace that much, but in the Hebrew sense, this word peace, shalom, means, for me, the most important sense is it means wholeness.
Yes. Right. Sure.
Wholeness. I wanted to say too, it's really important to understand that Hebrew is a verbal language, so even the nouns are constructed from verbs. So so the word, for example, that gets transliterated into the English translation of the Bible as Salem is the word shalem, based on the same word, and it's a stative verb, meaning the state of being at peace.
Yeah.
So the verbal aspect, I think, is really important because shalom is really an aspiration.
Yeah.
It is something you're constantly doing.
Yes.
You're always engaged in a process of trying to get peace, restore peace.
Yes. Right.
And as such, it's throughout your life and throughout our evolving human society, we are always in the process of working towards wholeness. Yeah.
Yeah. It's very
I love the body language that comes with that.
Yeah.
This, your words meant something and you shared a very nuanced definition, but I loved watching the body language because I think that also tells us something about what that word means. So, all right, I want to ask you a little bit about sort of your personal experience with Shalom and sort of reflecting on, was there a time in your life or a particular event where you feel like that was an experience of Shalom? Or when did I first come to understand this word sort of in a personal way?
I mean, for me, from a spiritual perspective, like I can't claim that I've ever come to a full understanding of peace. I've certainly had moments of peace, of wholeness, of health, of having restored a relationship that in a nature of peace, in a spirit of peace. But because it's so process oriented and so aspirational, what I would say is that the experiences I've had are stages of understanding more fully what it might look like.
Yeah.
Sort of
Right.
when I make the analogy sometimes, if you imagine peace as a puzzle with billions of pieces in it, I can't really imagine what the puzzle looks like. So I'm constantly trying to find pieces in it. And the more pieces I find, the more I get a sense of what the puzzle is, but I won't ever actually arrive at a full understanding of what that is.
Yeah. Can I just say my word nerd self loves the fact that we're talking about peace, P-E-A-C-E, and you just used a metaphor about pieces,
Yeah.
P-I-E-C-E-S.
Yeah.
I'm loving that for some reason, but thank you for that metaphor, though. That's also really helpful.
Well, so let's flesh that out even more, in that I think the thing with wholeness is that it requires an understanding of the parts.
Yes.
And
Right.
and for me, when I'm missing pieces, I'm not seeing those pieces.
Right.
And that happens to me personally. It happens to us as families. It happens to us as communities. It happens to us as nations, where we don't see certain pieces, or we disregard certain pieces. And in that sense, we are kind of not seeing a fuller picture. And then there's a problem there too on a religious level, because anytime you sort of either presume that you have all the pieces, or you get what the puzzle's going to look like, or you are missing pieces or ignoring pieces or whatever, you're sort of diminishing what God is, because God is the sum of all the parts. So if we're missing parts or excluding parts, we're diminishing the face of God in the world.
Yes, say it. I love that.
That's good. I see Shalom as kind of a multidimensional thing that exists in kind of very relational domains. There's that Shalom that we can experience within ourselves, Shalom that we can experience with our neighbors, Shalom that we experience within the community, within the land itself, and then Shalom with God. What would you say are the dimensions of life that kind of fall under the umbrella of Shalom from your perspective?
All of them?
Yeah.
All of them.
Sure.
Yeah. I would start first with spiritual practice. So in our prayers, when we step out of prayer, we say this verse. We say, "Oseh shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel ve'imeru amen," which pretty plain translation is, "May the one who makes peace in the heights, in the heavens, make peace on earth here, for us, for all of the people of Israel, and all those who dwell on earth." To add to that one of the commandments that is incumbent upon us as Jews is halachta bidracha, which literally means to walk in God's ways. But we understand it as imitating God.
Yeah.
Good luck with that. Good luck with
order.
that. Yeah, all order, right? So,
Yeah.
but it is, again, it's aspirational,
Right.
and that as individuals, as communities, as societies, we are commanded to try to emulate the aspects of God. We're somehow supposed to emulate the infinite beneficence,
Right.
of God, and the nurturing qualities of God. So when we say, "Oseh shalom," may the one who makes peace in the heavens make peace on earth here, we're also trying to embody that ourselves. We are the ones who make peace in the heights. In that sense, when we refer to the heights, we're kind of referring to heaven.
Right.
We're referring to that the whole picture that is beyond us, and that's kind of our North Star. May that person also find peace here. Means, in my body, in my life, in my family, in my communities, and the practice is to try to constantly maintain a relationship between the North Star and what you're actually doing here.
Yeah, sure.
Doing here. So so it's the beautiful thing. A beautiful thing is the word we use for the world to come in Hebrew is olam haba, and that means the world that is the world to come. But in a verbal sense, a very literal sense, it means the world that is coming, as in it's
Right.
flowing into us now. It's present
Yes.
here. We can have tastes of it. There are moments where we can have a sense of this of what our how we're being pulled toward that
Right.
North
Yes.
Star.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the dance to try to maintain that relationship between what is possible and what is.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
All right, so
Love
I'm
that.
gonna go in a little bit of a different direction, and we're gonna try to deal with it to whatever extent we can. The hardships and suffering and trauma and pain that is inherently part of the human experience. So when we think about that, and we think about sort of the ideal or the aspiration of shalom, how do those things come together? And how does shalom come to bear on the fact that there's deep pain and conflict and trauma and suffering in our world?
Yeah. I mean, I personally feel like there's almost nothing more important to understand as a society, as a world, as individuals, how trauma functions and how pain functions, how it affects everything,
Yes.
how it affects how we see other people, how it affects how we see our communities, how it affects our sense of safety, all of those things. So one of the meanings of shalom is about making someone whole, about making whole. It's just like one hair's breadth away from healing. The word shalom meaning healing. So I love the fact, for example, that the trauma studies have led us to say, instead of what's wrong with you, but what happened to you.
Yeah.
And that's so important because I feel like we, as humans, are also microcosms of God, of much bigger things. So just like with anything, there are things that we can know about ourselves, things I can know about you, and there are things that I can't know about
Right,
you fully.
sure.
So we all can relate through words and gestures, body language. You can get some sense of me from what's coming out of my mouth and from my body language, but then there's a whole bunch of other things you don't know, and there's deeper levels, or there's things I don't know. For example, like how is trauma affecting me? How are other parts of my mind affecting me in ways in which I'm unaware? So that's a whole person. All those parts, the parts that we can contact and the parts that are harder to contact, are all part of a whole person. And so learning how to and engaging in this constant practice of trying to approach someone as a whole person, knowing that each one of us is a whole universe. There's so much going on in there, and to try to approach each other, as individuals, as groups, whatever, with an understanding that there's so much going on in there.
Yes.
And holding that as a holy and sacred process, and also understanding, like, we're gonna mess it up over and over
Totally.
and over and
Yes.
over again.
Yes.
So it's a constant striving to try to imagine a wholeness, have respect for wholeness, feel a North Star sense, but
Yes.
also deal with what I can actually glean of the relationship, of our relationship, and what I can how deep can I make that relationship. And I think that requires at least having a sense of honor and respect for all the parts.
Yes.
The wounded parts, the whole parts, all of that, and everyone's carrying so much. Yeah, the really connected to peace too is our concept of teshuva, which is translated as repentance, but it means to turn, to return.
Yes.
And what it means is to return to the path, not a state of being,
Right.
Right.
but you're
Sure.
returning to the work, because we will mess it up.
Yeah.
And so much of shalom, so much of the healing has to do with relationships in which
Yes.
we are prepared to do repentance and repair.
Right, right. I love that balance with the idea that we covered earlier of there's that something pulling us, something from the future pulling us toward it.
Right, yeah.
And this aspiration of peace and wholeness and
yeah, yeah,
shalom.
yeah.
That's beautiful. Tell us a little bit about tikkun olam and the pursuit of shalom. Talked a lot about that today, but we'll go further into it. What is tikkun olam? What does it mean to you?
Yeah, right. So Tikkun Olam is an old concept going back 2,000 years. So I'm gonna try to
Yeah, sure. Just start there and just go forward.
Focus.
Cover the whole history.
One day at a
Yeah,
time.
We got
It's
time.
fine.
No.
Yeah. What it literally means is to fix or repair the world. So it's healing.
Okay.
It's healing.
Okay. Yeah.
So the idea is that that aspects of the world are broken, and it is on us to do the repair as much as possible. It's not on us to finish that work, but we're not also not free to just step out and abandon the work. But the work is about trying to effect healing.
Okay.
So very much connected to shalom. I would say that at the heart of what my religion is for me is it's all about relationships.
Yeah.
It's all about relationships,
Sure.
relationships to yourself, relationships to your family, to your community, to other communities. It's all about that. And there are sort of, real immediate brokenness that we can work on, and then there's the process of breaking and healing, which is just part of being a human being.
Yeah. Sure.
If you ask the data, people have actually done these surveys, and most American Jews, if you ask them on one foot, what is Judaism about, they would say it's about healing the world.
Yeah.
It's about repairing the world, which is a tricky thing to say because, I think a lot of times people think of those as like doctrines when they're actually practices.
Yeah.
Because we try them, we fail. We try them, we fail. Sometimes we get it right. It's amazing.
Right.
But it's a long process, and we don't actually know what a repaired world looks like. We can just have that as our North Star.
Sure.
And use those moments like you were pointing out where you get a taste of it.
Yeah.
To remind us like, oh, there's something pulling at us. And
Yeah, and really what you just said, and really what you've been saying this whole time, is just spot on for exactly why we're having this thing we're calling the Salem Interfaith Peace Vlog, right? This conceptual framework through words that are linked to actions, that are linked to, ways that we exist in the world and in our community here. And what a rich point of learning that is for all of us. So thank you so much for sharing about that. And I have one more question to bring it down to just a real local level. And I'd love to hear a little bit more about Temple Beth Shalom and sort of the work that you guys are doing and the ways in which you're living out Shalom or Tikkun Olam within your community.
Sure, yeah. So within my community, what we're working on right now is very much about the relationships within the community. So I'd say for the last 2 years, we've been focusing on learning the skills that are out there. They're hard skills that you can learn, that also require a lot of soft skills, but they're hard skills you can learn on how to communicate across difference. We're learning the skills of conflict resolution. We're learning how to sit down with each other and talk across our differences, because it's not like we're all on the same page. The joke is that if you have 2 Jews in a room, you have 3 opinions, or more. So we're always we have that work to do just in our community. How do we learn to hold each other as whole people, and work towards healing just within the community. On a Salem perspective, we did a communal discernment process and decided there were 3 areas that were important for our community to work on. And so one is climate justice, environmental justice. Another one is hunger and houselessness. And the last one is refugees and immigration. So those are the things that we're plugged into in Salem and constantly working on and trying to do what we can to contribute to a sense of wholeness and healing within our community in those areas.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us. We had a delightful interview, and we're so excited to continue this vlog series next month, where we will interview a different faith leader from a different religious worldview here in Salem to increase our understanding of how we envision and pursue a peaceful and thriving community. So thank you to Rabbi Ellie, who is here today, and my awesome co-host, Kyle.
Thanks, Kyle.
And
Thanks,
we look
Valerie.
forward to catching you next month.